Thank you. It's an honor to have amongst us our Slovakian colleagues. As we already heard, the first few minutes will be dedicated to presentation of the project that really was sort of cause for this visit or visitation.
Yes.
And then Iraklija, Chedie, I will present some quite relevant topic of still ongoing chain of replacements of this highest ideal of God.
Yes.
Maybe I can introduce you now, or just...
I will let Milos start, and he will introduce me, and slowly we will enter
Sure.
the lecture.
Let's do it like this. So few minutes just for the project. You don't have microphone on, and we are already recording. So please, yeah.
So hello, welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for letting us to come and share with you our research. I shall paint a bigger picture of where we are, what we do, how, just in a few words, don't worry. This project is by John Templeton Foundation, managed by Oxford. This is actually our second little grant, which we get there. So this kind of continuation of work that is going on for several years already. The first project was based on analytics and the techniques provided by Pavel Tichy and his transparent intentional logics and tools in it, and it focused on the main question was how come that the semantics or that people using the God terms or we broaden it to divine terms, understand each other. How can we explain what is happening when these have conversation in some pragmatic, practical manner? Of course, we, as is usual, didn't solve all the problems in the first project, so we kind of apply for the continuation, which I'm kind of really glad we were given. And the general focus on this second project is on modalities. That's in really short term is and trying to understand, explain, and model how are the properties of divine objects, if there are any changeable, if they are, how can we even discuss these possibilities? Like if people discuss that, for example, God necessarily exist, what does this mean? How conditions are of this being meaningful, and so on. And this second project has really two lines of investigations. One is actually provided as a continuation of investigation within this transparent intentional logics. I let it for Q&A, we can speak more. And the other is really an expressivist line of investigation, which I let my deputy PI, Mirko Sambrota, to tell you more about.
Thank you so much. I won't go into details. Just to mention, to make broader the picture provided by Milos, that what we are trying to do is to analyze the meaning of expression like God exists. And in particular, God exists necessarily. What we mean when we say something like this. Of course, it's a broad question, it's a big question, but we try to provide a formal semantics or a model in order to understand from an analytical perspective, provide an account of this meaning. Of course, there are tradition that comes from Kripke, from Lewis, that analyze the modality in a certain way that is called descriptive way, and also Pavel Tichy, that was one main focus of our previous research temperature project, went in that direction. What we try to investigate, apart from this path, is another path that is more contemporary, but also stems from the work of previous analytic philosophy like Wittgenstein, for instance, or Frege or others, according to which modality, a other sentential expression, don't describe something, but play a different role in the economy of the meaning of the sentence. This role is expressivist. Why? What we express? Well, this is a big question to ask, and also we can talk forever about that. But let's say that we make explicit some commitment in commitment which kind of linguistic framework and which kind of behavior and also form of life we share when we commitment to share this kind of behavior, linguistic framework, and form of life when we express this kind of sentence. So it's different kind of tool that we apply in order, well, to better understanding what's going on when we raise this kind of question, like big question, like what's existence? Well, first of all, what's existence? What does it mean for something to exist? Second, to God, to apply this property, if it's a property, to God. And the third one, to apply modality. So if God exists, but also necessary, for instance, in the descriptivist point of view, to any possible world. But this is just an account. So I'm sorry, I don't want to go into detail. It's a very complex and boring stuff, but I leave you the stage to a colleague of mine, another colleague of mine at Iraklija, that instead address this kind of question. It's also part of the project, but address this kind of question from a different perspective, more continental and also political side that give us some richer flavor to our investigation. I guess to just conclude a sentence, the best part, the richest part of our research project is exactly this broad perspective that we try to apply to this kind of investigation from different point of view, from different perspective, also not just focus on analytic tradition, also to open the door to continental framework. And I guess this is an interesting way to address these huge, interesting, and complex questions. Thanks again, and enjoy.
Thank you. I will try to be brief as much as possible. The topic is quite rich. This is the idea that I had some time ago, that the idea of God is being replaced, and how, why, what are the main ideologies or tendencies that are trying to replace the idea of God. I was thinking about it, and after some time I got this paper that I will not present all of it, but the main points that I had. So basically, I will start with this brilliant passage that Aldous Huxley proposes in his Brave New World, which is strangely prophetic novel. In it, this main antagonist explains to main protagonist that when man is getting old and weak, it feels discomfort of aging and feels as if he was sick without a cure, sickness of old age. Then his passions grow calm, and his reason becomes less obscure by earthly distractions, passions, and desires, and God emerges from behind the clouds. And this was a very nice and pretty passage that I liked very much when I was reading the book, and it suddenly struck me that main claim of this passage is not that God emerges behind clouds, but that the fact that our passions indeed grow calmer and our reason becomes clearer when we are aging, or at least it was so. It was so, and right now it seems to me that our world becomes this, as our world becomes more prosperous and more technologically advanced, our passions never grow calm, basically. We only continue to grow and grow them, and we try to stay youthful and energetic all the time, and or at least this is how the good life or good or proper life is presented to us by the existing economic and social system. And basically we never grow old, or at least we try not to grow old, and our reason is obscured, and we basically never reflect about the God, or about some God forbid unpleasant thoughts, etc., etc. because we are, again, trying to stay young till the end, and we have no time basically to rest from these distractions of earthly distractions and pleasures of the life that is offered right now to us. So in Huxley's world, there is this drug called soma, which is this basically analogy to the ultimate escapism that is offered to us, that we basically take this drug and we don't think about anything bad. We are in this blissful moment all the time, and we don't think basically. Now, of course, the question arises, what are these unpleasant thoughts and unpleasant moments that we are trying to avoid? Now, of course, the usual answer is this existential fears of humankind, and there are many authors, like, for example, Ernst Becker, this is American cultural anthropologist, who actually connected this our knowledge of our inevitable end to this very core of human consciousness and existence. There is another book by Sheldon Solomon. It is called The Worm at the Core, on the role of death, on the role of death of life. And in it, they have experimentally actually demonstrated that fear of our inevitable demise and need to somehow transcend pushes us to be more consumerist, seek attention, try to escape from unpleasant emotions and realities, and this is basically only because we are not able to bear in mind all the time this unpleasant truth that we will not be here forever. Now, as many studies and also our experience show, our existence, or actually we cannot exist in a world which is not somehow organized, where we don't have answers, where we don't understand what is happening, where we simply expect the unexpected. We actually want to have everything stereotypized and somehow organized in our mind, in our environment. And sometimes, if we are not able to find this consistency and order in the world, we try to generate it, force it, somehow fabricate it even. And we are trying to find these links and contexts and everything that actually makes sense of the life itself. Now, when I got to this point in my research, I suddenly thought that, okay, I actually know another system that try to organize everything and try to give a meaning of life to the huge masses of population, and these were the strong repressive ideologies of the 20th century. I'm talking about totalitarian regimes. And now we have to imagine, of course, that when the Nazi Germany and the Stalinist Soviet Union was forming their ideologies, there was this difficult situation in Europe, especially in Germany after World War I. Basically, all the things that actually had any meaning disappeared. There was this terrible economical crisis. People were simply confused. All the old truths were gone. New truths or explanations were never formed. So the strong ideology comes and it offers you this with an interesting twist that everything will be all right. Basically, they are telling you, do not worry, and for everything to be all right, just follow us and believe in us. Now, totalitarian ideologies offered exactly this basic satisfaction of the need to see consistency and structural integrity of the world. They promised us this ephemeral ultimate happiness and exploited, of course, our escapist desires, and sometimes even promised simply immortality, either through some great symbolic deeds, or sometimes these were directly stated that our science is so advanced, or will become so advanced that we will be immortal. But more, of course, in the symbolic sense, as for example, American author, this Chuck Palahniuk, he has this phrase that goal might not be the to really live forever, but at least to create something that will live forever. So now, this experience of totalitarian regimes of 20th century basically tells us that people, even well-educated people, at certain circumstances can succumb to these deceiving ideologies and can believe anything, basically. But what is very interesting to me, and I hope that you will find this interesting as well, is that in periods of these grave and terrible crises, we actually do not have shortage of explanations of how world works or what is the meaning of life or something. No, on the contrary, we are getting this excess of such interpretations. Like if individuals are not able to fit into the world with this particular interpretation, then they jump to another one and another one. And sometimes when this image of world disintegrates, people or population simply is pushed into a pathological state that actually opposes the common sense, and then they are actually very easy to exploit by such ideologies like totalitarian ideologies. Now, right now, even though we are not after some World War I or we don't have this terrible economic crisis of 30s that existed in 20th century, but still, right now it seems that situation is very depressing as well as turbulent. Like if we will look at the end of 20th century and the beginning of 21st century, it was full of destruction and recovery, and old regimes going away, new regimes forming, new systems of thought, these old systems of thought disappearing. The unbelievable technological advance that we have right now, and also just now we were fortunate to see the first global pandemic in 100 years, and all these factors actually contributed to this disintegration of implicit structures of reality of the world around us, the structures that we need to actually understand the world around us. And these old certainties are most probably unrecoverably lost. And we are left with this incredible urge to simply reinterpret our world, to understand it again and understand these new realities. And same as after the World War I, this understanding of the world in which we live right now is very fragmented. We are seeing some particular occurrences and phenomena. However, we are not truly able to understand and formulate this phenomena and these fragments as some structural whole. And now, again, I will go back to Huxley. He says something very interesting, that in older times, people believed in God because there were suitable conditions to believe in God, because people were getting old, sick, alone, they were scared of death. And this is why it was possible in 20th century for totalitarian ideologies to diabolically exploit these factors originating from human nature itself, right? Our evolutionary boundaries and existential fears of God. So if God is dead, or at least he is not here with us, then we men are the gods. We can remold our surroundings. We can do whatever we want. We are free to change the world without restraint. At least this is this Dostoevskian and Nietzschean twist, right? What totalitarian regimes exploited. However, now what is happening today in 21st century? If the totalitarian ideologies of the past behaved like these politicized religious cults, offering this alluring fiction to calm our existential fears, and they offered us this organized, consistent world where there was no coincidences, and they promised us this symbolic immortality, basically. What have some modern ideologies, movements, and tendencies learned from these past endeavors of strong repressive ideologies? Because after all, God has not resurrected yet. He's still dead in Nietzschean sense, and the image of the world has disintegrated even more, and life pretty much seems still meaningless, and consumerist societies again consist of more and more atomized, lonely, unhappy, or escapist individuals, and of course obsessed with this self-gratification and denial of death, like this constant push to stay young and continue young and die young, etc., etc. And well, my main question was that, is there still an effort being made to exploit these circumstances and replace the idea of God? Well, short answer is that yes. Nowadays we are living in the times where there is no need for this the immovable greatness of God and some kind of religious sentiments to compensate for our fears, because we became basically independent from God because of the prosperity that the new world is offering to us, as well as this futile try to stay young all the time. And now, very interesting thing that is happening is as well this, that we are basically conditioned to hate this solitude, the consumerism and this pleasure seeking is encouraged, so that wheels of economy are still turning, and various ideologies and tendencies are still trying to fundamentally change the society and give this powerful meaning of life to the lonely and unhappy individuals that I have mentioned before. Now, I will jump to some of the ideologies and tendencies that I imagine that are still trying to exploit this fears of ours and replace the idea of God and give our life some meaning. For example, if we will look at it very closely, we can see that these mass movements, these new mass movements like neo-Nazis, alt-right, these Antifa and neo-leftists, and these are basically modern reincarnations of the mass movements of the past. This is very easy, understandable. We can basically leave this out. They are working with the same methods, etc. But now look at some other ideologies, like for example, environmental movement, which has this one of the strongest ideological footholds right now, as well as identity politics that has completely dominated the public discourse especially in Anglo-Saxon countries. Now, let us also not forget this fanatical trust of Western elites in this neoliberal economic system, which is strongly in favor of the most exploitative and opportunist forms of capitalist dynamism that has actually intruded so much into our societal lives, like it has desacralized almost everything, including politics, religion, even the human well-being. Welfare state is being demolished, etc., etc. And final point that I have is ultra-modern technologies that are on the rise, and this technopositivism that has played key role in the advancement of the digital forms of capitalism, as well as creating this absolutely surreal and completely new dimension where human interaction and intellectual advancement became possible. Because look at the social media platforms or virtual reality and AI. This is something that never existed before. No one has even imagined something like this maybe 50 years ago, maybe 30 years ago as well. But these are basically wholly new systems where this human kinship that required some social interaction, this human kinship is now formed virtually through these surreal forms of relations and communication, aided, of course, by these ultra-modern technologies, which create this desired sense of belonging and will and organizational might, of course. And this, I will finish quickly. This allure of this already established or emergent ideologies and tendencies, this allure is still the same, basically. This promise of stability and near perfect certainty of things. They again try to tell us that, okay, do not worry, everything will be fine, just follow us, just believe in us, because we have the solution. And if we will organize ourselves, and if we will simply try and do our best as a community, as this global community, then we will be able to solve all of the issues, basically. And same as in 20th century, these new substitutions of the idea of God, they try to again remold and transform these human beings and to create a new human in the image of their ideology, of course. And why? Well, because we humans still need we still have a need to escape the unpleasant reality and to believe in some symbolic promises and some symbolic structures that actually give us strength to continue with our lives and simply try to try to actually do something better. But and this was, of course, true for hard totalitarian regimes of the past, as well as this age of softer consumerist and escapist turn that modernity brought to us. But here is my main worry. And it is in parallel with the great Georgian philosopher Merab Mamardashvili. In one of his articles, Consciousness and Civilization, he wrote that he was writing about this impending anthropological catastrophe that he was afraid of. This was events are happening in and around human beings that might threaten our basic human principles like I think, I exist, and I can. And he was afraid that for a number of reasons we might end up like this Nietzschean last man, unable to dream and aspire and to think, and we will be only capable to earn a living in order to keep ourselves comfortable. Now, if, of course, achieving of this ultimate happiness and finding a remedy for our existential fears is one of the most defining characteristics of human beings, then of course this worry will still remain. Most probably we will continue to seek this symbolic immortality, to tranquilize our minds with some escapist activities, and simply try to replace the idea that once played a key role in our mental, and maybe not mental, but actually ideological stability. Like we believed in ourselves, we believed that we could think and act and exist and can. Then, unfortunately, I am afraid that we will still cling and desperately cling to the idea of God or its substitutes. And I am again afraid that in this unstable and immature state, basically, of humanity, which is right now defined by this uncontrollable progress and new discoveries and these new technologies and basically this jump from old systems of thought and certainties to the new ones, then again I am very, very worried that we might not be able to stay without these ideological unhealthy ideological influences that these new substitutes of the idea of God offer to us. With this, I guess I will finish, and we can continue with the discussion. If, of course, you have some questions, I will be very glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Irakli. Maybe I can open the floor for questions. Maybe someone online. You can also participate if you want. Otherwise, maybe I come up with a question. I am convinced by your thesis. It's really this logic of supplementarity and replacing terms. It goes on and on. But maybe I would broaden it a bit more. Maybe I'm curious why you chose this example of previous century totalitarian regimes. Wouldn't you agree that it goes really till the beginning itself, that even deities are structured as a replacements of the old, and even themselves there's so many occasions where they're replaced, but maybe even New Age, then God is replaced, for example, with the reason, and humanity becomes, takes more of this role. So how would you maybe broaden this thesis to the longer
this is
history?
very good question. Yes, actually, in 20th century, it was the first time when the old deities or old divine understanding of the world did not got substituted by some other divine understanding, but it was the first time when we simply declared that actually God is dead and we humans are the gods that can actually change the world. And the totalitarian ideologies are very interesting exactly because of that, because they caught this moment and simply exploited this moment of this feeling of our omnipotence, because they actually were trying to convince us of our omnipotence. They were constantly trying to wage war against nature with these huge infrastructural projects and I don't know, pushing rivers towards different beds, and I don't know, making these huge tunnels and railways, etc., and somehow like showing you that if we are now organized and we have proper means of organization and violence, of course, then we can actually do what we will, because we humans are now gods. And this was one of the alluring ideas that they offered our escapist minds of the atomized people at the time. The ground was very, very fertile back then, because the unhappiness and disaster that struck Europe after World War I was simply unbearable for most of the population. I don't know if it explains.
Sure. It goes, sure, in this context. But even this organization of life and productivity is already in, for example, Tour of Babel, and it's the same logic. The effort put into overcoming and so on. Maybe some questions from our online audience. Natse, Tanya.
Okay, so thanks, Iraklija, for presenting this point. What caught my attention was the interplay between stability and inevitability of the new systems. The assumption, or the naive assumption about the, let's say, old god with asterisk, or old gods, it depends, is they're here, they're inevitable, therefore you have no reason but to oblige. And stability was kind of just a consequence of this ominous fact, if I put it this way. But these systems which you suggest or you paint as a replacements seems for me to diminish these roles of inevitability and present their main selling point as they are the only way to be stable. They're presenting stability, and okay, maybe that they are the sole. They try to sell themselves as the sole producers of stability, maybe as they have their inevitability as a consequence, not as the source. So maybe I would like to hear your point on this interplay, whether this isn't changed a bit. Thank you.
Yeah, this is also very, very interesting question. Stability that, for example, the environmental movement offers us is this understanding that if we will manage to somehow I don't know, reduce our negative influence on environment, then we will stabilize this, I don't know, global warming, and therefore we will be able to, I don't know, maybe maybe have more time to find some permanent solution, like, for example, I don't know, these fusion reactors, etc. It's a new sources of energy, etc., which will solve our half of our problems. And yeah, this promise is basically promise of stability, not of inevitability. But if you go to and look towards a little bit more radical movements inside of the environmental movement itself, they are presenting like environment or death, like again, the death is inevitable. And if you go towards our way, then in this way we will be again able to basically defeat death. At least this is how I understand their arguments. But I don't know if the inevitability actually stayed as a valid argument in these substitute ideologies, because yes, indeed, they mostly now offer stability as well as this understanding that if we are all together organized, doing something together with some goal, clear goal in the end, then we will be able to manage it. And yeah, it's a nice point that I will try to investigate a little bit more, this interplay between stability and inevitability. Thank you.
There's also one, we can maybe address it later. It's in comments. It's maybe a comment and also a question as well. Of course, this was a short presentation. You probably have a kind of part 2 of this when you propose some kind of future possibilities for the thinking of God. So I would like to learn a little bit about your own, project, if there is, of course, of God, futurity of God. But the first comment, if it might be connected to this, of course, observation is that I'm coming from the American pragmatism or American religion perspective, which is a bit different. So in terms of, the totalitarians of the 20th century, American culture did not produce fascism or Stalinism or Nazism. And there is a thesis that the reason probably lies in its inherent like historicity, awakenings, like first awakening with Jonathan Edwards, but then second awakening with Joseph Smith, then William James as American Nietzsche, then my favorite thinkers as John Dewey, Richard Rorty, especially Roberto Unger with his Religion of the Future, which is a totally pragmatist, and he talks about self-awakening of the self again. So what do you think is there a difference within the Western world? There is a divide. It seems that these are typical European concerns with, grand narratives of ideologies, not like in the American experience. Maybe capitalism could be in the place of both ideologies of the 20th century Europe, but still it's not probably on the same layer still. So how would you argue on that?
The thing is that this American way was this reactions, basically reactions to what was happening in Europe. At least this is how I understand it. They found their moving force opposing fascism, because before World War II, America or USA was very how they say it, isolationist. They were pushing for isolation of US. They did not want to go into another war into Europe, and which costed them pretty much the first time. And this reaction to fascism then, of course, continued with the reaction towards the communism. And of course, I am absolutely sure that this capitalist dynamism, the this intrusion of capitalist dynamism from the economic sphere into the societal sphere played a key role as a substitution of the idea of God in USA. At the same time, we should also not forget that USA is still using basically this traditionalist method of calming our mind, which is of course again religion, whereas cults and this traditional as well as this new religions or cults. And again, I'm sure you're sick of hearing this, but capitalist dynamism brought this consumerist turn of the modern society, and through the consumerism, the society somehow, as if society somehow is trying to fulfill their needs to or actually fight against their existential fears. You are consuming, you are buying, as if you will take it with you in the afterlife, or as if this will somehow close or delay this intrusive existential fears and thoughts. So I don't know. This would be my answer to that.
Okay, thank you, Iraklija. We have another question. It's written in the chat. So, why do we need in modern times, in your opinion, a merciful God like in Christianity, for example, and why not a cruel, fearful one, as it was in older cultures? Old Testament.
Old Testament,
Yeah.
The New Testament, the Old Testament, in Old Testament, God was very cruel indeed, and this idea of benevolent and helpful God comes from the New Testament, and I'm not exactly sure if we need this good, benevolent and nicer God right now in Europe or not. I am simply afraid that by replacing this idea of God, because this is, or let's say this idea of God that played key role in calming our minds, basically in keeping us productive and calm and cooperating, etc., and not so egoistic, but more collectivist, etc. That this idea is simply going away, and now we have the different idea, which is, of course, again very closely connected to this idea that human himself is omnipotent. He is becoming a God, and now we are witnessing this individualist turn, where basically we are becoming this God from the Old Testament. And yes, we could interpret it like this, that yeah, maybe the cooperation and more collectivist approach can be interpreted as this benevolent, nicer God who is actually helping out and making everyone rather than one individual happy.
Okay, thank you. Another question, okay, and then we can continue discussion next.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have two questions. One is really simple. You said that society, humanity is immature. I was just wondering, do you think that it's really getting more immature, or is it just the contrast between the mature and the immature side more visible? So that's one question. And another one, unfortunately, totally not related to this one, but since I'm already speaking, I'll ask that second question also. So you said that these extremist ideologies often stand chance against the idea of God. And I was wondering why, since these extremist ideologies do not address the question of how I got here, so no origin. They hardly ever address where I go from here, and they just vaguely address my purpose, my morality, why I am here. So yeah, so again, immaturity, and why do extremist ideologies stand chance against the idea of God?
So for the immaturity, I think that this point about contrast is very nice point. It is simply my understanding that when we are becoming technologically advanced and we have new tools to use, and these tools are simply so new that we sometimes are not sure how to use them. For example, this new revolution with AI, we are simply prone to the errors, and this is when you give some little bit complicated toy to a toddler who is not yet mature to play with this toy, and the toddler breaks the toy, is unhappy, and somehow this is the analogy that I have, that yes, of course, we are now much more advanced than we ever were, but at the same time, we are still struggling to interpret these new realities in which we live. We have the older explanations and rules do not work simply, while there are no clearly understandable new rules or interpretations that will help us to address this new technologically advanced world. As far as these repressive ideologies and mass extremist movements, this mystical property of these totalitarian movements, and like even now these mass movements that exist right now, is this promise that everything will be okay. And with this, they are simply exploiting this our existential fear that you never know what is going to happen. In this book, Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, there is this passage. I don't know if who has read it, but there is this personage Voland, who is the presentation of devil, and he visits Moscow in 30s of 20th century, and he speaks with this poet who thinks a lot of himself, or actually his publisher, doesn't matter, and the conversation goes like this, that publisher, I think, says that he's not afraid of dying. And Voland says that it is not that you are afraid of dying, you are afraid of not knowing when you will die. So this, when you will die, the utmost uncertainty of things, maybe now there underneath of us, there is some, I don't know, gas pipe that will explode and kill all of us. You never know. But at the same time, you never think about it all the time, because otherwise you would go simply crazy, right? And now these totalitarian ideologies, as well as modern extremist ideologies, they are trying to trick us that, okay, you never know what is going to happen, but if you will follow us, if you will simply try and support us, and if you will organize with us, then the world will be less chaotic, less uncertain. And this struggle against uncertainties is something that is being exploited. And I think this is the answer to your question, that how they are still able to trick us like this. It's because unfortunately our nature is so, human nature is so fragile, that we are still not able to bear the thought that some uncertainty will happen. We simply need this consistent world where you can come inside the room, turn on the light, turn off the light, and nothing unexpected happens. And I think this is how I would answer your question.
Okay. Sorry, prior to that. Okay. Then go on, sorry.
Just a small quick comment, like I feel the pressure of the question, like how do they stand a chance? And first that came to my mind that they need to raise the stakes. They need to push or put some pressure on raising on you to be dealing with some problems, and you kind of are you have to forget about something else. Like I have 2 kids, one or at least one job, and there is simply I don't simply have enough time to deal with all the problems. So I have to focus on the main ones, and especially let's say this enviro movement. They are presenting this like no, like this is the biggest problem, because if we don't solve it, this everything else
Is lost.
is
Yeah.
lost. So maybe this is the answer. Like they stand chance now, and maybe the way they do it is you press you that hard that you don't have time to ask those questions.
Okay, thank you. Then maybe we can conclude with that. Thank you again, Irakli,
Thank you very
for
much.
answering all the questions and giving wonderful lectures. So
Thank you. Thank you as well. It was a pleasure. Thank you for the questions. I
Then-
really enjoyed them, and they will give me some food for thought as well.
okay, then we'll conclude this part, and yeah, you can take some snacks. They are on the table behind you, and maybe we can continue
Yes,
less
let's
formal
continue. Yeah,
conversation.
definitely.
Thank you
very
also
much.
to all
Thank you.
in the online audience.